Okay, I am just being inundated right now with beautiful, gorgeous, incredible winter knitting patterns. How am I possibly supposed to decide what I'm supposed to knit? Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today we have winter knitting plans to discuss because it's our time. I feel like as knitters, this is our season. This is where we really thrive, which means I have some decisions to make and it's really, really hard. So as for my mug and tea of the day, this is my mug from Hoya Atelier, and out of it I'm drinking I think it's like a creamy Earl Grey. It's from Sipology. It's good variety, you know. Also, for those of you who are not new here, you might notice a slightly different setup going on. I am not feeling great today. I am functional only by the grace of the electric heat pad that is plugged in behind me. So I had to haul my desk chair in here so I could have something to sit on that would let me have that. I also have my legs like stretched out and sitting on the bench that I'm normally sitting on top of. So I'm sort of like half laying down right now. Anyway, this is all a little bit makeshift. Hopefully this all works out okay. If it doesn't, I'm sorry, but it was kind of this or nothing. As for what I'm wearing today, this is my Serendipity sweater by Knitting for Breakfast, which accommodates bust sizes from 24 to 65 inches, which it's actually like time to wear now, which I'm really excited about because I finished the sweater in May. And so I literally had not worn this at all until like a couple of weeks ago. And I was sort of like, do I not like this sweater? Like, I know that it's mostly been warm, but like I'm growing a little bit concerned that I haven't even been thinking about wearing it. And no, it turns out basically since it became November, since we got out of like autumn Halloween-y season and more into like, okay, we're actually starting to head into winter now, this sweater suddenly started to feel appropriate in a way that it really felt very like out of place to me in October. The idea of putting this on felt wrong, and I was getting kind of concerned that I'm like, do I just not like this sweater? Do I just not want to wear it? And no, it turns out I'm very happy to wear it. I just need it to feel like it could snow outside in order for this to feel appropriate. It's gonna take a while for that to be a good number because this project cost was 227 Canadian dollars. So divided by 4 wears, that puts us at 56.75 Canadian. So, you know, we've got a ways to go, but you know, I hope we will have a long, lovely life together. So today we're talking winter knitting plans, which also includes going over how the rest of my fall knitting plans went, including I do have a finished object to show you today. We have a lot of ground to cover, okay? Also, just a little bit of housekeeping. I recently have started a new Instagram account for my channel. I just sort of been operating under this sort of like solopreneur umbrella on my Instagram, and I was starting to feel like, oh, I have this knitting related thing that I kind of would like to post, but if I do that every time I have this feeling, it's gonna end up being like 90% a knitting feed, which I don't really want to do to that account like for its other purposes. It was just starting to feel hard to manage. So if you were following me before and you didn't see my post announcing this, please go move on over to Allie Makes Everything on Instagram. And if you haven't followed me there, honestly, you weren't missing a lot because of this whole like balance issue. I was almost never posting, but I am intending to start posting more now, particularly because of just the way that things work out with my filming schedule. There's sort of a time lapse in between that makes it tricky for me to actually like solicit advice or feedback at times when I would like to, but just with the timeline, like if I ask a question, I won't find out until way too late. So I think that Instagram is a really helpful place where I can sort of interact with you in a much more real-time sort of way. So if that's something that interests you, definitely go check out Allie Makes Everything on Instagram. So like I said, we have a lot to cover today as far as plans and project updates go. But first I want to tell you about the sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. So lately, with the days getting shorter and life getting so much busier heading into the holidays, I've been having a much harder time managing to fit in filming at times when I have nice natural light available. And every time I look at my footage when I haven't filmed during the daylight, I'm always just so disappointed with it. I decided it was like maybe time to try to do something about that, particularly heading into this winter. So I've been taking Simone Ferretti's Skillshare class, Turn Your Room into a Pro Video Podcasting and Meeting Home Studio. And it's really wild how huge a difference a few small artificial lights can make when you actually know what you need and how to position it. I kind of figured these things would be pretty expensive and would take up a lot of space, but apparently you can get those big soft boxes that actually fold down and they don't have to cost a lot either. News to me, but this This class has me thinking about what I want my next investments in the channel to be, so I can have a lot more recording flexibility without sacrificing the quality. And speaking of the holidays, that person who you have no idea what you should get for them, a Skillshare membership is such an easy solution because they truly have something for everybody. Whether they're into fine art, design, photography, fiber arts, technology, they can learn from real creative professionals who excel in their field. If you want to give it a try, the first 500 people to click the link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Plus, you can gift Skillshare memberships to your friends and family. Get started today. So as always with my seasonal knitting plans, I like to start them by looking back at what my plans were last season and how those actually panned out. So, fall knitting plans. As usual, the honorable mentions category kind of went as expected. You know, I always list some patterns that I'm like, I'm realistically probably not gonna get around to these, but I was thinking about it and look how nice they are, and maybe someday I'll knit them, and maybe if something kind of goes off the rails with my plans, maybe I'll divert to one of these instead, and yeah, didn't touch those. Moving along. So my main goal for my fall knitting plans was what I was calling my Peru sweater. This was a sweater that I wanted to knit out of the alpaca yarn that I brought back with me from my trip to Peru earlier this year, and I decided I wanted to knit that up into the Rivendell by Sari Nordland. And check, you may have seen this one. This was a finished object in a recent video of mine, and I love it. Super happy with how it came out. That fall knitting plan was a big success. One thing on my fall knitting plans list that was somewhere between a concrete plan and an honorable mention, I had sort of a maybe, probably, hopefully, and this was the idea of knitting a hat as a Christmas gift for my nephew, and this one actually did end up happening. This one ended up being a Musselburgh hat, which I was talking in a recent video about kind of doing the planning steps for, and that one is actually now done. So that's the finished object we're gonna circle back to later in the video, but for now, that one's a check. And my one other concrete knitting plan for fall was the book club cardigan by Sari Nordland. This was the season of Sari. So this one I have started. I have some progress on that I can show you in a little bit, because this is going to continue into winter knitting plans because it's nowhere near done, but it got started. Just doing the Musselburgh kind of ate into some of that time, and also it's proving to be very slow going. It's very involved, which you'll see more shortly. The one other thing that was a sort of relevant point from the fall knitting plans is that I had put myself on a yarn buying ban. I was feeling like I kind of have acquired yarn too many projects out because I don't personally like the feeling of having a stash. It stresses me out. So I was like, okay, we're not going to buy any yarn, with the exception of if we go to a fiber festival, we can buy yarn, which is how I ended up purchasing the materials to make my Musselburgh. Stayed within bounds on that one. And the milestone that would make me be allowed to start purchasing yarn again is to have cast on the project using the last project quantity of yarn that I have, and to be kind of past the initial worst setup part of a project. You know, the part where you're like, I can't really take this with me anywhere until all this is done. And that was my Wensley worsted and Coquelicot for my book club cardigan, which I'm now far enough into that project that I met that criteria, which means I might have bought some yarn for some of these knitting plans. Actually, just one of them. But I passed my yarn buying ban because I waited until I was well into starting my book club cardigan. So it's all above board. And this doesn't mean it's like, oh, now I'm suddenly gonna go buy all the yarn. The goal of this was to kind of try to get back on a cycle of, as I'm getting close to starting a new project, that's when I'm going to go and acquire the yarn for it. So that's kind of the track that I'm trying to stay on. But I just wanted to note that I successfully accomplished my fall yarn buying ban goals. Okay, now getting into the actual winter knitting plans. As usual, we're gonna do a round of honorable mentions. These are things that made it into my Ravelry favorites bundle. I'm sort of always collecting patterns, thinking about what I might want to fit into my next seasonal knitting plans. Like basically anytime I add something to my favorites that is something that I actually think I might really actively want to make in the near future, I will place it into a seasonal bundle. I usually have them set up for a couple seasons out. If it's like, okay, I know I won't get to it this winter, but maybe in the spring, and I'll pop it in the spring bucket. So these are things that made it into the winter bucket that just when I was then looking at my winter bucket, I'm like, I can't possibly knit all these things this winter. And I had to start whittling it down. These are the things that got whittled. But again, this could mean any of these could be circled back to at any time if my actual more concrete plans get exploded, go awry, I get frustrated and decide I need a change of course. Or also, maybe you want to knit them and I can live vicariously through you. That would be great, thank you. So first up on this list is the King Salmon Light by Caitlin Hunter, which is a fingering weight version of the famous king salmon that we've all been seeing everywhere, Fish Girl Summer. When I realized there was a fingering weight version, this changed everything because I've been intrigued by Fish Girl Summer. I wasn't immediately like, I need to make this for myself, but largely just because it seemed like a very hot, very insulated. I know there's controversy over the depth of the yoke, and I wasn't sure how I would feel about that. What time of year do I want to be that warm, but also be repping fish? I was just having a hard time understanding like when I would wear the king salmon, but I did find myself like weirdly compelled toward it. And so realizing that there's a fingering weight version, which also, by the way, has a much shallower yoke, unlike the traditional one, this really kind of addressed all of my concerns. And also because ever since I finished my tucker, I've kind of been like, oh, fingering weight knits are really useful. Like I love, 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 love all my like DK worsted, Aran, even bulky weight sweaters so much, but like I can only wear them like half the year, right? Like I am in Canada, specifically in Ontario. Like our winters are cold, but our summers are so hot. So like there's value to me in having more transitional weather knits in my wardrobe, and I'm sort of entering the phase of my knitting where I'm more willing to do things like knit a whole sweater's shape of garment out of fingering weight so it's much thinner. So I've been thinking it would probably benefit me to have more of these lightweight long sleeves, and this is a really great entry into that category. So like I said, this is a fingering weight pattern. It accommodates bust sizes from 22 to 69 inches, depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. This pattern costs $9 US, and this is a top-down circular yoke construction. So I might be a little bit late to Fish Girl Summer, but I am here for it. I have gotten on board the fishing boat, perhaps. And I feel like if I were to knit this, I think I would like to do something really high contrast, maybe like a black and a cream or something like that. Also, I have to give credit. I wasn't really seriously considering the king salmon until I went to Woolstock and ran into, I think your name was Emily. I'm so sorry if I had that wrong, but you were wearing a gorgeous king salmon sweater. And something about seeing it in person really clicked something in my brain for me that was not really happening just from seeing it online. And suddenly I was like, I really need to consider this. All right, our next honorable mention is the Bloom Pullover by Brianna Mason, which, like, speaking of super heavy sweaters I could only wear for a very limited portion of the year, this is an Aran weight colorwork sweater. So like that yoke is bulky, okay? So is it the most practical thing that I need all the time? No, however, look at it. And I loved doing this stranded colorwork so much. I have been thinking about what do I want my next stranded colorwork project to be. Again, I think I kind of just want to do this one very like high contrast neutrals, again, black and cream, which seems funny because so many of my knits are in really like bright, fun colors. But I think I'm noticing that if something is just a textured pattern, then I really enjoy throwing a really bright color at it. But when there is like color work stuff going on, I don't know, I mean, I do love how this looks, but I'm finding myself gravitating toward the idea of a more pared back color palette when the design itself is more intricate on like a graphic level. Anyway, this pattern fits bust from 28 to 62 inches, and the pattern costs $8 US, and this is again a top-down circular yoke construction. Something else I really like about this one is similar actually to the Serendipity. I love when the top of the yoke is a different color from the bottom of the yoke. I think that something about that helps it feel more balanced to me when a sweater just has a yoke design that stops on the body. I find that when the top and the body are the same color, it can just kind of feel to me just kind of top heavy and like where did the rest of it go? But having that color split kind of makes it feel more deliberate and like it just makes more sense to me. I think this might be one of those patterns that just kind of kicks around my honorable mentions for season after season until it eventually makes its way into the top priority like concrete knitting plans, because I just really like this one. And the reality is it just kind of, there wasn't room for it in and around the other things that I'd already decided that I wanted to do this winter. But I am really attached to this one. Another pattern that's in my honorable mentions for this season is the Heirloom Quilt Cardigan by Katrin Seeberger, so this pattern has been in my Ravelry favorites like almost since I started knitting. Like this has been in there for years, but I have never even seriously considered knitting it because the pattern is written to be knitting all of these separate squares and then you seam them all together to create the cardigan. And like know thyself. Like, I would hate nothing more in the whole world than that seaming process. Like, I would be so angry. I would be so mad at past me for signing me up for this by having knit all these things that I now have to do this with. It sounded horrible to me. And so it hung out in my favorites as a thing that I would look at every time I looked at my favorites and go, ooh, pretty. We'll never knit it. But this has been in my thoughts again because Suni of Mothfolk Studio has been working on hers, and I have been living vicariously through it. Every time she posts an update of it, I'm so invested. I'm like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I want you to have it so badly, also because I want me to have it. And just in having it be sort of more front of mind again, many years later in my knitting experience, this got gears turning because I was like, wait a minute, I go off the rails with patterns all the time at this point. Like, when am I ever out here following a pattern, not messing with it at some point? Like, there's gotta be a way I can do this without seaming 500 squares, right? Like, I could probably just knit this in one piece, right? And so I kind of like sat down and like looked at the description of how this pattern is written. And so these squares are all done as stranded color work. So I'm like, I don't see any reason why I couldn't actually knit this in one piece as stranded color work, but it would just be an intarsia twist where those two blocks meet each other, and then it would be stranded color work from there. And because it's a cardigan, like, you're knitting back and forth, so the intarsia would work. I don't see a reason why I couldn't do this. And having that thought has made this a much more viable prospect for me now. Now I'm like, oh, maybe I actually could knit this. So again, there's just not time for this season. The tough part of this one is going to be figuring out a color palette, because I feel like there's so many possibilities with a pattern like this, right? This could have as few as 2 colors or as many as whatever number blocks there is in it times 2. Like, there's so many possibilities for color that I feel a little bit overwhelmed in trying to figure that out, and I am just so not there yet. Maybe I'll be able to work some scraps into this. I'm not sure. There's just a lot of stuff to figure out that kind of prevents me from ordering the materials that I need to get them in a timely manner to actually likely knit it this winter. So not actually probably going to happen, but again, one that may well kick around for a while until it eventually makes its way into my future knitting plans somewhere down the line, because I just really love this pattern. So in terms of sizing, this one is a bit hard to give you an accurate range on, because this pattern says that the testers knit with anywhere from 15 to 30 inches of positive ease. So I'm just gonna tell you what the finished garment measurement range is, and then depending on your desired ease on something like this, do with that what you will. But these finished garment measurements range from 50 inches to 78 3/4 inches. Okay, and this pattern costs $12 US. And I was also thinking that this winter it would be really nice to knit myself another headband. Particularly, I've been really liking my Iverson headband, but blue just doesn't always go with what I'm wearing, and so I was thinking it would maybe be nice to have something a little bit more neutral. Probably not gonna happen this winter. No headbands have actually made it into my concrete plans, but you never know. Headbands are small, they don't take too long. So the first one that I was looking at is the Plush Braided Headband by Yevgenia Lee. So this is a free worsted weight pattern, and this is one where you just knit it to whatever length it needs to be to fit the circumference of your head, so the sizing is totally flexible. And one of the things that I think is really neat about this one is that it actually doesn't connect all the way at the bottom, and there's a little button join, which means that to put it on, you're not like pulling it over your hair and messing up your hair. You can actually like delicately place it on top of your head and then just button it closed, which just makes it seem like a much better option for times when you're like trying to go somewhere and show up looking nice. It just kind of avoids the like hat hair problem. And I think that's really smart. Also, I'm kind of like, do I want it in a neutral color, or do I just want 20 headbands in every different color? I mean, realistically, I think, so I currently have my blue one. I think I would like a cream one maybe to match my scarf, and then probably a red one. Like, blue and red are the 2 colors that I wear the most, so those are probably the 2 colors that make sense to have, plus a neutral. That seems like the right number to have. And as for that third headband, that could possibly be Floed by Apella Knits. This is a DK weight pattern with 3 different head sizes that cost €5. And I like that this one is something different from cables, but it still has a lot of very interesting texture, and it also has those super cute wavy edges. And I always love like a twist or a knot in a headband. So I think this one is really cute. I would also really love to add this one to my collection at some point. But alas, there is just not enough time in a season to knit all the things that I would like to knit. So let's get into my actual concrete winter knitting plans. And I spilled my tea. Of course I did. Also, it's really funny to me. I not infrequently get comments being like, it stresses me out so much watching you hold that tea and watching it slosh around while you're looking at the camera and not at it. I don't usually spill it. I also don't never spill it. Anyway, so first up, I'm pulling out a project bag because the first thing on my concrete winter knitting plans is to finish my book club cardigan, which is a substantial plan because this is what I have of it so far. So this is the book club cardigan by Sari Nordland. As for the weight of this, Sari knits this out of a combination of a sport weight and a lace weight held double for what's written to be a worsted weight yarn. Now, heavily documented on this channel. I can in no universe even begin to approximate Sari Nordland's gauge. She is way, way, way looser of a knitter than I could ever be in my wildest dreams. So the idea of me using a sport and a lace weight and together accomplishing worsted weight yarn is absolutely comical to me. So since I knew that like anytime I'm knitting Sari Nordland, we're off the rails as gauge goes. So when I fell in love with the Wensley worsted and the colorway Coquelicot from La Bien-Aimée, I was like, okay, this is a DK weight. I know I'm gonna be off gauge. I know that's off gauge for this project, but also I was gonna be anyway. So like if I was gonna have to do a bunch of math, why not do it to knit out of the thing I actually want to? So that's the story of how I'm knitting this out of a DK weight yarn, which to compensate for my vast gauge discrepancy, I'm knitting a size 5, which I would probably be knitting like a size 2 if I were on gauge for reference. So like that's how off we are. What could go wrong? And in terms of size inclusivity, this pattern fits busts from 29.5 to 61 inches, and the pattern costs €8.90 or about $15 Canadian. The problem now is I'm so far away. Let me try to show this to you. So we have a lot going on. There's these horseshoe cables, there's this diamondy cable starting to happen at the sides. There's the moss stitch all through the middle. My God, this is slow going. So this is the back panel, right? This is like the back of the neck up here, and it's increasing out for the shoulders. So when you cast on here, you're starting with like a narrow portion of the chart, right? So you start out, I think you're like just doing moss stitch, and then you add in more stitches gradually to form your horseshoe cables on either side, and you add more stitches, you get into these like diamondy cables. If you know what those are called, please let me know. So it means that when you're getting used to working with the chart, you're not kind of confronted with the full width of the chart all at once, which is probably a good thing because it's quite elaborate and that would probably be scary. But it also means that the whole time I was working this back panel, I could never just like relax into, okay, I kind of understand what the chart's doing. I can read my knitting. I don't need to be referring to it super closely. Every time there were increases, it was forming some new cable-y thing that was gonna do something different. So getting this set up has been very involved. This is sort of just past where you finish the like dedicated chart for the back increases and you start just following the main chart, while still doing increases, mind you, but now you're just repeating the main chart around. So I finally gotten to a bit of a more stable point with things, but it just meant it's just been so mentally intensive. So I'm glad to finally be at the regular chart. This is where, like when I say I got past the hard initial setup part of this project and that meant I could order more yarn, it was because I finished that back increases chart. This is like a week of knitting, which that's not a good week of knitting for me, just in terms of like general fabric amount. I mean, like, I think this is beautiful. I know it's going to be so worth the time that goes into it. I do look at it and I'm like, that's it. I feel like I did so much more than that. It's just very slow going. So my winter knitting plan number 1 is to finish this. And like I said, I'm knitting this out of the Wensley worsted from La Bien-Aimée in the colorway Coquelicot because you probably know I'm obsessed with a good warm red, a slightly orangey red, and I saw this and they were having a big sale and I was like, I need it. Now, did this perhaps override my better judgment? Because even with the sale, because of duties especially, This was expensive. How much did this cost me? This cost me $276.30 Canadian for the yarn itself, and then I got hit with the duty charge when the package arrived, which was an extra $44.01 for a grand total of $320.31 Canadian, which I felt better about it when it was under the $300 mark because the duties hadn't happened. So adding up our yarn, the duty, the pattern costs, and also the buttons that I needed to order for this, those cost me I think $10 or $11. That puts our current project cost at $346 Canadian, just scooting in under the $350 mark. That makes me really feel like I've totally jumped the shark. So let's hope I don't need to acquire anything else to complete this project. So I'm knitting this on 3.5mm needles, which is the needle size recommended in the pattern, but I'm only using the same needle size as Sari because I'm using a smaller yarn weight and knitting at a much finer gauge. This is my curse, to love Sari Nordland patterns and be able to knit nothing like her. In terms of construction, I think I thought that this one was a top-down seamless construction, but that's actually not true. You actually just knit the whole back panel and the fronts and then you attach it. So I have backed myself into a corner where I have to do some seaming, which I don't love, but I do love this pattern enough that I will be happy with it when it's done. Will I be cursing my gauge when, because it's finer, I have to be doing more stitches to seam it? Absolutely. But I do think I will be upset. Look at the color, isn't it so good? It's perfect, it's beautiful. It just may very well cost me my sanity. So also in terms of the process for this, I should show you my multiple swatches because, like I said, I am knitting this on the same needle size as Sari, but I started out thinking I should size up my needles by default because I always do with Sari patterns and often quite significantly. So I figured even though I'm using a smaller yarn, I can probably still go up a needle size. But I actually found that when I did that, the fabric was more open than I wanted it to be. I just felt like, I don't know if you can see on camera, but I just felt like you could see more light coming through it than I was happy with. So I ended up knitting a second swatch on the 3.5mm and found that it looked a lot better. Also, I don't know if this is just me, but so I swatched in moss stitch because that's what a lot of the pattern is in. Both of my swatches turned out to be like parallelograms. Can you see that? They're very like skewed on the sides. I don't understand. The cast on and the bind offs aren't overly tight. Like they have room to stretch still from what they naturally sit doing. Is this just something about moss stitch? Why is it a parallelogram? I also on this one, I intended to do the sort of like popular Ravelry shoulder mod because I guess the way the pattern is written, where the back joins the shoulders, the way that the cables line up, they just kind of don't line up as well as it is possible to if you just kind of make some modifications to like what row you start your cable twisting on and things like that. But I just like forgot. Like I looked up how to do it, but it's like, okay, when you get to this row in the chart, that's when you do something different. And just like 6 rows after that row in the chart, I was like, oh yeah, I was supposed to do something up there, wasn't I? So I think I missed the boat on that one. So I will not be doing those shoulder mods, but I also don't think I will ever think about that ever again. Have you like seen a store-bought knit and like how terribly those are typically assembled? Do I think it would have been a nice detail if I had remembered to do it? Yes, but I also think we're just so trained to like not look that closely and not notice this sort of thing. So I'm not really worried about having forgotten it. I certainly don't care enough to redo this, which took a week of my life. One thing I did decide to modify in this chart though is that, so you can see on either side of this horseshoe cable, there are these columns of just one single knit stitch between 2 purls. And I was just finding that because of the purl on either side, like that knit column was just not looking as tidy as I wanted it to, and I just felt like it was taking away from things. So after the first few rows, actually you can see the difference because I started with normal knits and then I started twisting those and it just looks so much tidier twisted. So I decided to do that just to keep things looking a little crisper. So this is my obvious winter knitting plan and definitely a high priority for me, but I'm realizing that I think this winter I'm really going to need to break out of my tendency to knit monogamously for a couple of different reasons. So number one, there are a couple gift knits that I have decided that I would like to do for Christmas. So like, there's just simply no way that I will get this done, period. I don't think there's any world where this would be done for Christmas, let alone to get this done and also get the couple little gift knits done that I want to get done. And also I have some travel coming up this winter, and it's become abundantly clear to me in the week that I've been working on this that this is just not gonna cut it as like a travel project. It just requires way too much of me. It's the sheer amount of cabling, like I think I'm learning about myself Like, listen, I love cable knit. This one is like you're cabling every other row. It's too much. I don't have any time to like build up the accumulation of stitches that I'm excited to see transformed, and like it's been a while since I had to do a cable row, so it's exciting. This is not like that because it's like constant. So I think I have found my limit with how intense of cabling I like to do by exceeding it. I will get this done, but is it going to be my favorite process knit of all time? I don't think so. And it's very clear to me that this is not going to be a good travel project because it's not something that I feel like I can just whip out and work on for a little bit on the go. Like I really have to be set up with my chart and focused. It's not something I can knit on while carrying on a conversation. So when I go away, I think I'm gonna have to put this one on pause, leave it at home, and bring a project that's a little bit more travel friendly. So speaking of these gift knits, my next winter knitting plan is a golf club cover, which is going to be a bit of an adventure because A, I've never done one of these before, and B, if you've never done something before, why not self-draft it? I was just finding there aren't a ton of options on Ravelry for golf club covers, and just none of the ones that I found were quite what I was looking for. So my boyfriend has requested a golf club cover as his Christmas present, and this was very funny to me because I, a very long time ago, told him about the myth of the boyfriend sweater curse. So he has adamantly insisted that I do not knit him a sweater. He lives in fear of the boyfriend sweater curse, but apparently he's feeling comfortable enough that he can ask for a golf club cover and thinks that he'll be safe there. So I've been trying to come up with what I would want to do for this, and I'm approaching this as a little bit of a two birds, one stone kind of project because something that came up in my fall knitting plans honorable mentions was Rory's prep school cowl from my Gilmore Girls knitting book, and I was interested in that one mostly. Yes. Yeah, I hear the dog barking. Good job. Yeah, that's a good bug. Come here. So I'm petting a copper over here if my hand is moving weird. So, and what I really wanted to learn from that pattern was that I think it uses like a mosaic or a slip stitch style of color work to accomplish the plaid pattern. And I've never done that kind of color work. So I really wanted to learn how to do that. And it just, again, didn't fit into my knitting plans. Still like the idea of making it, but again, hasn't made it into the knitting plans. And the more that I think about potentially designing my own color work thing at some point, I just kind of want to have a handle on all of the different options for color work so that I can come up with a design and know what is actually the best way to accomplish that out of all the available options. So I'm actually thinking that for this, I'm hoping that I can take the plaid chart from that pattern and the general instructions of how to do this kind of color work, but modify the chart to be like a smaller plaid that would work on a golf club cover. This is what I'm currently thinking. And I am thinking I would like to do this at a DK weight so that I can make this out of scrap yarn that I already have. And for the like shape of it itself, I'm planning to use as a base the pattern golf club cover Escher design by Sherry Kibbeler, just because this is a DK weight golf club cover pattern that I think the general shape of it looks nice. I like the pom-pom, I like the proportions of things, so I'm planning to use this as sort of my, well, I'll make it a blank slate, it's not currently a blank slate, and apply onto it my own modified from the Rory Prep School cowl plaid pattern onto this instead, because I couldn't make my life easy. Pattern is $4.50 US, and I already have the Gilmore Girls pattern book. That was a Christmas gift for me last year, so I have that. Now, as for materials, like I said, have some scraps I'm hoping to use, which have some dog hair in them because they've been floating around in various projects at various times. Let me try to degross them before I show you. So this is my collection that I'm thinking. So this is just some black Cascade 220 left over from projects a million years ago. This is my Shelterwood Fiber Co. dark gray brown from actually my Serendipity sweater. And this is the Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Blue Tit. And I think that held together, these give a nice like tonal range and combined would make a nice plaid, I think, hopefully. But I think it'll be fun to knit something all out of scrap just because it's small and I can, and that's kind of fun. My projects don't usually really allow me to do that. My next winter knitting plan is also kind of in the same vein. I seem to have this thing where like I will knit no little small accessory kind of projects like all year, and then I suddenly will knit a bunch back to back. I don't know what these weird moods are that come and go, but I was thinking that once I had this request for the golf club cover, I was thinking I would like to see if there's something that I can add in with that to make it a little bit more substantial. I just felt like that's gonna knit up really quickly. And like, if we're being honest, like based on the amount of time he spends doing things, you don't see this, but like so much of the time that I get to spend working on this channel is because he is cooking me dinner, and then he's also doing the dishes, and he's also doing all of these other things that keep our lives running. And I felt like the least I can do is maybe also make him some other little thing that's not a sweater, because again, he fears the sweater. But I was thinking, I recently mentioned when I finished my Rivendell that I ended up with a whole leftover ball of that alpaca yarn that I was trying to figure out what to do with. And a few different people mentioned that that's probably the exact right amount to make a pair of fingerless gloves. And what I like about this idea is that he was actually on that trip to Peru with me. So the yarn actually has a bit of a sentimental background for him too. So I thought it would be fun to make him a pair of fingerless gloves using that yarn from Peru, which I have actually started doing. So this winter knitting plan is actually already a little bit of a winter knitting reality. So this is my, again, 100% alpaca from Manos de la Comunidad, which is a sort of like alpaca farm experience in the Cusco area. And this is a DK weight. So I went looking for DK weight fingerless glove patterns. And one of the ones that turned up that I quite liked is actually happened to be brand new. It's the Cityscape Mitts by Tori Yu. This is a one size pattern. It costs $7 US, and I'm actually modifying this one. I basically love everything about these, except that I just felt like it would be more his style without the cable twist in it. So I'm just replacing, it's I think a 4-stitch cable. So I'm just replacing those 4 stitches with 2 more knits and 2 more purls in the 2x2 rib design. So it was a super easy modification. And I am currently most of the way done the hand of one. Like I'm very close to the point where you split for the thumb and the top of the hand. And I'm knitting this one at a time, which is very unusual for me, and also I think will change soon because I do need to make sure that I'm not going to run out of yarn. I am cutting it very close on yardage based on the pattern estimates, so I do want to be finishing these 2 at a time so that if like the top of the hand ends up needing to be like 2 rows shorter or something like that, they will be the same. But I've been having kind of an issue in trying to knit these gifts for him because he's always around. When I'm knitting, he's usually sitting beside me. And I was like, well, that kind of makes this hard. And I don't want to spoil the surprise. Like if I were knitting something really big like a sweater and where really specific fit was really important, I would absolutely be spoiling that surprise in favor of the end result being something that he really loves and would actually really wear. But as established, not allowed to knit him a sweater. Things like this, like they're smaller, they're lower stakes. I don't feel like I need to vet things to the same degree. So I'd like to keep the surprise intact, particularly because he doesn't know I'm making him anything out of the Peru yarn, but it's hard. So I realized actually I have been working on this in front of him by lying. I've been telling him that I am making a pair of socks just to see if I can get a pair of socks out of this ball of yarn, which if he were a knitter, I think he would know that that's not enough yarn to make a pair of socks, but he doesn't know that. And when you're knitting a fingerless glove with increases happening for the hand, it doesn't look unlike a sock with like a heel turn or a gusset or something, you know, like you could believe that this is an ankle sock and we're kind of working the heel turn, and he's just, he asks about what I'm knitting and he's curious and he will look at it, but he doesn't look that closely. So up to this point, I felt like I can work on this beside him and he won't be any the wiser. But because I'm kind of trying to make sure he's not paying too much attention to what I'm doing, I didn't want to spend a ton of time getting the 2 set up side by side. It's kind of a headache to me to get that set up initially, and I just didn't want to invite any questions while I was doing that. So I just was like, what's the fastest way I can get this going? Just quick, cast on some stitches and start knitting. So that's what I did. And at some point I'm gonna need to find some time when he's not around to do the parts that start to make it look a little more obviously like a glove and to get the second one going and caught up. And also to do the golf club cover. I mean, he knows that one is coming, but he doesn't know what it's gonna look like. This is the problem with trying to surprise knit for someone who's always around. It's very hard. So this pattern is written to be knit up on 3.5mm needles. I'm knitting it on 3.75 just because my gauge is always small, and I figured if I'm playing yarn chicken, I can't afford to make this fabric any denser than it needs to be. So I've been using 3.75 and I really like how the pattern is looking so far. Actually, let me put this on so you can kind of see. What I really like about this pattern is the style of the increases that go across the palm. I think I have that positioned right. It'll be more obvious when there's like a thumb hole that kind of keeps things where it's supposed to be, but I think that's looking really nice. It feels really nice and cozy. The alpaca is really soft. And again, because I'm knitting this out of scrap yarn, this is a very inexpensive project. It's just the like $10 Canadian that the pattern works out to be. And like, if I were to count the value of this yarn, this was $24 Canadian for the one ball, but I factored this into the cost of my Rivendell because that's what I bought this yarn for. So to me, for this project, it's free. All right, next up, now is when we're getting to the aforementioned travel project. This is where we're actually going to finally see, this is a very special moment, one of those very honorable mentions that have been floating around the seasonal knitting plans for many seasons at this point is finally graduating into a concrete plan. We love to see it. This is the All Good Tea by Magdalena Parker. I've been wanting to knit this for ages. This is a fingering weight, all over stockinette, sort of oversized, boxy, dramatic tee. And I love it and I want it. And I've just been struggling to figure out where this fits into my seasonal knitting plans, and also just kind of to convince myself to do this much stockinette, this small of a gauge. But to me, that sounds like the absolute perfect fit for travel. Like, you mean I can just get this going and just be like knitting in the round this small, and I can read an instruction that says knit it for 10 more inches, and that's going to take me days to weeks? Perfect. Like, what could be more perfect for travel? So its time has finally come, which means that I did order some yarn for this project. So like I said, this is a fingering weight pattern. This accommodates busts from 33 to 59 inches, and this pattern costs $9 US. Now, part of me did wonder if, okay, this is like a t-shirt, like should I be knitting this in like a cotton merino? I'm kind of curious to try something like that because I haven't before. Should it be in like a linen, you know, things that would make it feel more summery. But the sample for this is knit in a merino, and when I was looking at the projects, the ones that I like the most are all in merino. I think just for the structure of this project to really shine, which is what I love so much about the pattern, I think it just needs the bounce of wool, and maybe that's a little bit impractical on the fiber front, but also maybe this is just perfect for days where it's not quite cold enough for a sweater, but I still want to be wearing a cozy knit. Maybe it's perfect. Cross your fingers. Anyway, I decided that I was going to knit this out of Stainless Yarn Sunday, which I have used once before, but only in my Magnolia Bloom, where it was held double with the Essayer Soft Silk Mohair, which frankly, I think like it's what's responsible for how incredibly dreamy that sweater feels. So I don't really know what Sunday feels like to work with on its own. So I'm curious to try that out. I mean, just holding it in the skein, it feels similar to me to the like knitting for olive merino, which I've used many times. So I don't imagine it's going to be anything in particular to write home about, except the color. And you're probably gonna laugh at me, but does this look familiar to you? My book club yarn. They're not the same, okay? Listen, I like an orangey red. Sue me. I also, because we're gonna make this informative and not just ridiculous, I also brought some leftovers of my Knitting for Olive blood orange to compare for science, so you can laugh at me and learn things. Honestly, I think this is maybe truly my absolute perfect warm orangey red, perhaps more so than the Wensley worsted. So they're very, very incredibly similar. I'm not sure how the color comparison is looking on screen versus in real life, but in real life, this one is definitely more saturated. They're very, very similar. This one just has a little bit more depth and a little bit less like fluorescence almost to it. Nice to have variety. Don't tell me they're the same color. I am very excited to knit this t-shirt out of this. I'm kind of aghast that like this is apparently how much yarn I need for it. This is 7 balls of Stainless Yarn Sunday, which just seems like an incredible volume of fiber to go into a t-shirt. I mean, like, it is oversized. It does have these, like, the sleeves are very wide and they basically go down to the elbow, so maybe it's like functionally the same amount of sleeve area as like a normal fitted long sleeve. It just seems deranged. It just seems like so much yarn. But anyway, so it's 7 skeins of Stainless Yarn Sunday. This is the color 4018 Scarlet Red, which is the absolute most perfect red. And this cost me $117.83 Canadian. I ordered this from Galt House of Yarn, and I'm extra happy about this color. I was so delighted when I opened the package because I was taking a bit of a gamble in placing this order. In my ideal world, I would have gone to the store and I would have looked at the colors, because Stainless Yarn Sunday has both the 4018 Scarlet Red and they also have In their like petite knit Sunday collection, there's one that's called, I think, Poppy Red. And online they look quite close, and I was having a hard time figuring out which one would be more the type of red that I actually wanted, because colors online can only tell you so much, right? Like they capture the yarn at a specific moment in time under specific lighting conditions. So particularly if you're comparing one brand's yarn to another brand's that were photographed under different conditions, it's functionally impossible to compare the subtleties. Like when we're discussing colors that are this close, right, you cannot tell online how they directly compare to each other. Like you just can't. And so in trying to compare even just the Stainless Garden Sunday colors, it was really tricky. So I was doing the thing where you like search in Ravelry by yarn colorway and then like looking at all the projects in this one and then all the projects in Poppy and trying to like compare across different lighting conditions, like which one do I like the look of the most in the most lighting conditions. It was just very, I was aware that I was making as informed as I could of a guess, but a guess nonetheless. So I was so thrilled when I opened the package and it looked like the color of my absolute dreams. So between my yarn cost and the pattern cost, we're looking at a $130 Canadian total project cost. So apparently it's the season of red knits, okay? I don't know what to tell you, but also actually looking at them under this lighting, again, lighting makes such a difference. Earlier looking at these under natural light, I felt like really the only difference between them was the saturation level. But looking at them here, I feel like this one actually also looks ever so slightly orangier than this one. Can you see it? Do you think I've just lost my mind? It's fine, let's move on. Actually, let's not move on. I would like to tell you, with my whole red obsession, recently I was out to dinner and the waitress said to me, "Your shade of red nail polish is the exact perfect shade of red." And I went, "Thank you so much. It's a limited edition shade that when I found it, I bought 12 of them." Because prior to that, I was mixing it myself. And you may think that I've lost my mind, but the waitress at the restaurant validated me, and that's all I've ever needed. Okay, and lest you think that we were out of the woods on me suddenly knitting like weird little accessories and things, no, we're actually going back in the direction right now, because the next thing on my concrete knitting plans list is the pole dance socks by Hypercycloid Designs. So this is a free pattern for fingering weight yarn that works with whatever like magic number for socks you like to use. So these are on my list because a family member of mine recently texted me being like, "Oh my God, I just saw like this picture of these socks online. Like, aren't these so cool? I wonder if you can knit something like that." This is someone who has been through a lot in the last year and their birthday is coming up in sort of early spring. So I was thinking it would be really nice if I could knit these up over this winter and send them to them as like a birthday gift. I am also just like so curious about these socks. So let me read to you what it says about the construction. I don't really entirely understand what this means, and I figure I will just find out as I go. So it says, "These socks are worked flat in 2 sections, except for the cuff and toe. The heel is a no-wrap short row heel tucked into the first section of the sock. Stitches are picked up along the sides of the first panel, so the second panel can be joined as you go along. No intarsia, no seaming. Spiraling is achieved with simple increases and decreases at the beginning and end of each knit row. Directions are included for both a wedge toe and a star toe." I feel like I like 75% understood what that said, and I will learn the rest as I knit them. But so for this one, kind of the key next step is figuring out what I want to knit this out of, because I would really like to knit a version that really kind of replicates what the photos look like, in potentially different color scheme, but similar stripe sort of situation, like similar size of stripe and similar like tonalities, just to really match the effect of what they loved so much. So I've been looking at self-striping yarns. I'm currently eyeing up Area 51, which is a Canadian self-striping yarn company, but if you have any recommendations, I would also love to hear them, because I'm definitely in the market for a self-striping sock yarn for the first time in my whole life. So I don't really know what I'm doing. And lastly, I have one more concrete knitting plan. This is happening because I feel like this has been a really long list, and it's deceptive because I don't normally have a bunch of accessories or small pieces on this list, so I don't really know how to estimate how much I can knit in a season when so many of the things are such small things. But I'm putting this in my concrete plans perhaps on a hope and a prayer, but I would love to finally get around to knitting a storm sweater. I have been wanting to knit the Petite Knit Storm Sweater forever, and I would love for this winter to be the time. I think that this sort of all over texture, but that's just knits and purls, like taking a break from all of the cables that I've been doing this year. And I also like the idea of knitting something really oversized right now. Like this pattern is already designed to be oversized. I think it's like a 10 or a 12-inch recommended ease, but I kind of want to go even bigger than that. Let's do project stats before I get into the details. So this is the Storm Sweater by Petite Knit. I believe it's a DK weight pattern. It accommodates busts from 28.25 inches to 61.75 inches. And this one costs 50 Danish kroner, or about $12 Canadian. Yarn-wise on this one, in my ideal world, what I would love to knit this out of is the Valley Farms Northampton in the colorway Ocean Heather, because Amy from Knee Knits knit a sweater out of this not too long ago, and like if we're gonna get into my obsessions with like particular color nuance, the exact levels of like greeniness in the blue, this like deep teal is just the exact perfect shade to me. Like I love it, but a couple of problems. So number one, this yarn seems to be widely sold out. And also, even if it weren't, I just was not able to find anything about Valley Farms Northampton yarn. Like I just, in my yarn shopping, because I can afford to, I like to avoid yarn that I don't know is mulesing free and, you know, otherwise certified in, you know, the ways that we like to know that bad things didn't happen for our yarn, whatever. But I could just find nothing about this yarn at all, which just made me like a little bit concerned and like, maybe I'd rather try to find this color somewhere else. But again, because of the particular color nuance, that's really tough. But so far, the best option that I found, it's definitely a darker version of it, but for me, it still strikes that like exact perfect balance. This is one that I can get from the Knitting Loft. I just realized that I fully never finished that train of thought that I was having when I was talking about the Scarlet Red and how in an ideal world I would have loved to go look at it at the Knitting Loft. But here's the problem, again, because I wanted that project as my travel project, my life is just mayhem until I leave right now, because I mean, like holiday things are happening. I have to wrap up work things before I go. But to be honest with you, mostly what's making my life a disaster right now is YouTube, because if you go away and you like pause posting videos, the YouTube algorithm punishes you severely, and it can take months to get your channel back in terms of like level of engagement to where it was before you left, which means that I am trying to prep in advance, which is just so much extra work. And so just the prospect of trying to get myself to the Knitting Loft, by the time I get there and I get back and I've spent some time there in the middle, like that's probably at least like 2 hours. And I just am really not looking for 2-hour errands to add to my to-do list at this moment. So this is why I ended up taking a bit of a gamble ordering it online and was so pleasantly surprised. But because the Storm Sweater is a little bit further down the line, I am hoping to get myself to the Knitting Loft because they've recently started stocking Sonder yarn, and their colorway Dream State looks so perfect to me. But again, because this is a pricier yarn, right? It's hand dyed. I would love to confirm that this is the shade that I think it is before I spend a lot of money on it. Hoping to get myself to the Knitting Loft at some point to verify that. But if there are other yarns that you can think of that come in a color that is this sort of precise greeny blue teal color, and also specifically rich color, because I know that Knitting for Olive has their color Petroleum Green that's sort of in a similar hue range, but that one honestly kind of bugs me. It feels washed out to me. It doesn't feel rich and deep. It feels like it has this very clear like white base showing through. I'm looking for options that are sort of like that but richer. So if you know of any, please do let me know. Okay, that is it for my winter knitting plans. Is that perhaps ambitious? When are my seasonal knitting plans not too ambitious? Like here I am carrying on a just started fall knitting plan into winter because I overestimated what I could accomplish. But you know, let's shoot for the moon and maybe you'll land among the stars. That's not actually how those distances work out in space, but it's a good saying. So now that we're done with our seasonal knitting plans, we can sort of transition into the regular knitting podcast stuff, which means I have a finished object to show you. which is the Musselburgh that I knit for my nephew for Christmas. So this is a double-sided hat. So this is the fun variegated side, my Musselburgh. So let's run these pattern stats real quick. This is the Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. This is a really interesting flexible pattern that works with yarn from light fingering weight to DK weight, and it comes in sizes baby to adult XL. And for this, so I'm making this for my nephew who is 10, and I was not able to measure his head, but I figured like I'll just measure my head and make it fit that, because I don't know, I don't feel like his head is that small. Like you're pretty formed at 10, and also I feel like I have kind of a small head. This is such a weird thing, but anytime I'm like in a group photo, I'm always looking at it like, why does my head look so much smaller than everyone else's? I don't know. Anyway, using that logic, I was like, whatever size my head is, I will just make that. And better for this hat to be like a little bit too big than to be too small. So measuring my head, the correct size was an adult medium. So that's what I made. We cross our fingers that it fits him okay. So this side of the hat is knit out of Fergus yarn. Here's my broken label. This is in the colorway Koi. I have no idea if that's in focus. I'm too far away to tell. I'm so sorry. But my whole idea with this hat was that it was going to be a Naruto hat, because he is absolutely obsessed with Naruto. And I wanted the inside to be the sort of like stealth fan version of a Naruto hat. So it's just sort of, it's the colors of Naruto, but there's nothing on it that explicitly alludes to Naruto. But if you flip it, it has the little Naruto logo on it that I did in color work. So I'm so happy with how this turned out. I feel like it's so cute, and you can actually make out the symbol like quite clearly. And I'm also really happy, let me put this on and show you the fit. So it's nice and like snug in the way that it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere, but it's not at all tight. It just feels like cozy, and I feel like I really like the way that the crown sits. There's like a little bit of space there that gives you a nice kind of like casual look, but it's not like too slouchy, and it's also not doing like weird standy uppy pointy things. I fully expected the first time that I knit a hat for the proportions to be like a little bit funky and for there to be some trial and error before I felt like I really had found the right hat combo that I really loved. But like, I truly don't know what I would possibly do differently on a different hat. Like, I think that if I ever knit any other hat, it just has to be this hat over and over again. Like, it's just perfect. I think I might have modified the dimensions slightly from the pattern for a slightly thicker brim. I'm trying to remember, because I mostly was actually referencing someone else's project on Ravelry where they had done the like 4-piece color blocking so that the brim would match the hat, whereas a lot of people just cut the Musselburgh in half, and so there's a contrast brim regardless of which way you flip the hat. So I was following this one specific project on Ravelry and following, I think, her measurements. So I think I maybe got a bit of a thicker brim, which was useful for the color work portion and fitting that in. Oh, I forgot to mention this pattern costs 6 Great British pounds, about $12 Canadian, which honestly feels like a pretty good deal for how flexible this pattern is and how much reuse value most people get out of it. I almost never knit the same pattern again, but I could easily see myself knitting more than one of these, especially like it is a good gift knit. It truly went by so much faster than I expected it to. Like, so I was knitting this at a sport weight and I was like, oh my God, am I ready to knit a sport weight hat, especially the Musselburgh? You're knitting this whole giant, big, long Kinder Egg shape. Like, is this just gonna be the death of me? And it was so compulsively knittable. The circumference was just perfect for working on my regular needles with my shortest cable length. The rows went by like as quickly as they possibly can without being so short that I need magic loop. So it was just like that absolute sweet spot. And also, time capsule, I was working on this the most during the World Series, which I've never cared about baseball in my life, but the Toronto Blue Jays were in it. Everyone was very excited, and the enthusiasm was contagious. I was suddenly watching so many hours of baseball, staying up so much later than usual, particularly the game that went until 3 in the morning. So, okay, I just had to readjust because I've been yapping for so long that batteries died. But anyway, we're back. I was yapping about the World Series, which is, I mean, not super on topic, except that it is responsible for the fact that I got the vast majority of this hat done within the World Series. And it also had a very direct impact on the kind of weird way that I knit this hat, which we'll get to in a minute. But for posterity, some highlights. Vladdy miming from the outfield, like, take a breath. I think about this all the time. I'm like in yoga, stuck in my chair pose, and I'm like, Vladdy says breathe, Vladdy says breathe. Ernie's like smile as he like lands this home run in game 7. That is like forever emblazoned. He's like sliding across home plate. Oh my God. The little pep talks that Kirky would go up and give the pitcher, be like, it's okay, man, you've got this, relax. I just love all of it. I found it very endearing to like start to like get to know personalities. I don't know, I'm gonna be very upset if any of them end up on different teams now, because like, what do you mean sports teams trade people? That's like not allowed. So for those of you who still don't care at all about baseball, I need you to know that Game 7 was like, if there was a movie about baseball, and so they had to write a version of the World Series that went as dramatic as it possibly could for like ultimate dramatic effect, like that is exactly what happened. Like it truly was the most like suspenseful. Looks like they've got it. Looks like they could never possibly come back. Oh my God, they're coming back. But the moment when Jimenez got hit by the pitcher's ball after almost getting hit like 4 other times in a row, and then actually finally got hit, and everyone's like, what is wrong with this pitcher? The whole team like stormed the field. Like, what are you gonna do? They all just like go to stand there, and like they all know like it's World Series Game 7. Like no one's gonna do something that's gonna get them kicked out of the game because the stakes are too high. So they all just kind of like go out there and like look tough, like stand around, and then everybody comes running from like the dugout and like the bullpen. Like, what are you like extra 5 guys gonna do? There's already 50 people on the field. And then next up at bat after this whole kerfuffle had happened was Springer. And on the very first pitch, he hits it and the ball smacks back into the pitcher who had been the one who hit Jimenez. Was just so fun. Like, again, you could not have written it better. So funny. Like, it was not on purpose. It was just the perfect, like, karmic retribution. I don't know. I'm a baseball fan now. I'm so sorry. But I'm telling you all this because this really did very seriously impact this hat, because the problem was with the Musselburgh hat, you start at one end with this pinhole cast on, which, by the way, I was enraged for like 5 minutes and now I love it. I found it very hard to get the needle in the loop that I needed to get it into at a certain part of that process, and I just could not do it. But just like fiddling with it, I kind of realized like, oh, I can actually just like literally use my fingernails and just physically like pick open this loop to make it easier to get my needle in there. And doing that, it was totally fine. And it is just very cool and very satisfying, because you kind of start with this weird like sort of open looking tiny hole, and then you just like pull this string and it magically like cinches it up, and it just looks very neat. I really liked it. And so then you're doing your increases, then you get to the point where you're working in the round. And then I reached the point where I was done like the crown of one side, and then it was time to get to the colorwork brim. But this colorwork brim took a few tries, 3 times to be specific, and way more attention and like figuring things out on the fly as I go than was compatible with watching the World Series, which means that I didn't actually knit the Musselburgh. I knit 2 first halves of the Musselburgh, and then I Kitchener stitched them together in the middle. So I have never read the second half of the Musselburgh pattern. Never met her. I just knit the top part twice and then stuck them together in the end, because that allowed me, once I hit the brim where I needed to pay more attention, it allowed me to keep knitting by just starting the second half and then leaving the colorwork brim for the very last part. Now, when I got to the end and needed to actually do that Kitchener stitch, how did I feel about my past self? Not great. I was sitting there going, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions, because it felt like it took forever. I think it actually took me maybe like 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half. I don't know. It was just, who likes doing that much Kitchener stitch? Not I, but it worked, and it was truly, like, it sucked that I had to do it at the end, but like it was very worth it for what it enabled me in terms of being able to continue knitting on the hat when I wanted to, while like other things are going on. I watched a lot of those games like at sort of watch party kind of scenarios. One of those was at the Rogers Centre when they weren't playing in the Rogers Centre. So like technically I was at the Rogers Centre when the Jays won a game in the World Series. It just happens that the Jays weren't in the Rogers Centre that day. But so like I really needed a project that, again, like the travel project I have in mind with my All Good Tea, I just really needed something that required nothing of my brain, and having this annoying Kitchener stitch at the end is what enabled this project to be that for me until I could finally come back and do the colorwork brim after the World Series. And so this is where, when I say I knit like 95% of this, the brim took me like the next 2 weeks or so of just like trying something, it's not working, ripping back, try it again, so it was a bit of a process trying to figure out what is the best way to accomplish this design. So the first time I tried the brim, I think I was trying to figure out like, is there a way to do stranded when it's not going all the way around? Because I was thinking with stranded color work, I could do this whole design like this, the gray background piece and the design on top of it all in one fell swoop. And at the time I was thinking that the black design on here would be the same blue as this hat. So it would just be a 2-color color work, but I could not come up with a way to make it work in this configuration where color work is not going all the way around the hat. Maybe there is a way to do it. I was not succeeding in finding ways to do it online. So then I was like, okay, I think that my best bet is to do this, just the gray part as intarsia, and then I will go back in with duplicate stitch to create the black design on top. And that way, again, it's black. It gives me a little bit more pop too, and also kind of fits the character's headband a little bit better. But now we have a problem because the stranded color work wasn't working because I couldn't do it fully in the round. Intarsia, kind of tricky here because intarsia is supposed to be worked flat, which this is not. So it was a problem on both ends. But I did know that there are kind of finicky ways to like sort of fake in the round with intarsia. And so some of these use short rows. I tried a method using short rows at first and I did not like how it was looking. I couldn't get it to look tidy in the way that I wanted it to. And then I found a method with a tutorial by Franco, I believe is his name, and bless this man, he's a saint. These videos are so long because they are so thorough. It was tough for me because like the problem is what he's saying is actually important. Like it's actually not a case where it's like, okay, just where's the 7 seconds of the tutorial where you tell me the important part and the rest is just fluff. Like so much of it is important to actually understand how it's working in order to be able to apply it in kind of all the different versions of situations that you'll run into and working, and even just in different spots on your own chart where like the colors are going this way or that way or whatever. But this is part of why this brim took me so long, is because I needed to be in a headspace of like, I'm gonna work on this while watching this 1 hour long YouTube tutorial now and trying to wrap my head around this technique, which I don't like being taught how to do things. I don't like not immediately getting things and being good at them. This is a growth area for me. So I did not really enjoy that process, but Franco is an absolute saint. And if you do need to figure out how to do intarsia in the round, I do highly recommend his videos. Do I highly recommend intarsia in the round? No. So I got it done. I was learning from Franco and got most of the way through my second brim attempt using that method. But toward the end, I kind of got confused about something and something looked weird. And I just kind of felt like, I don't know how to recover this at this point based on how it went weird and how I'm still learning this whole intarsia in the round. I'm just gonna restart the brim and like watch this different version of his tutorial because he's done like a few videos about it, and just start from scratch following his other tutorial and see if it turns out better. And that third time did successfully yield this gray block in the middle. So much work went into this very simple gray block. But so it did the job for what I needed to accomplish. I don't think intarsia in the round is something that I would be like, yeah, that's a good strategy I would like to apply for other things going forward. It definitely works. Like, don't get me wrong, like it is a solid strategy. I just find it way more like mentally taxing than it's worth. Maybe I'll eat these words. I'll use it again at some point to make something that's really the only way to accomplish it without a ton of seaming. If you're curious, just the basic of how this works is you're essentially knitting flat, like you are turning around at your beginning of the round, but your beginning of the row is positioned so that it is always where two of the colors join. So your twist between those two colors of the yarn is what holds it together and looking like a round rather than an open piece of fabric. But what this means in terms of how you actually work it, you're working like provisional color joins and all of it. Like it's very strange. And maybe if I did a lot more of it, it would become more second nature. But just after doing the brim basically twice, it's very not second nature. I really had to be very actively thinking about what I was doing the whole time. And there's a lot of just little like contingencies of like, well, if your chart is doing this, then you have to do this. And particularly like when your color join moves, if it's at that beginning of round spot color join, you have to slip stitches in order to put the beginning of round where it needs to be. And I found it very confusing to figure out which way I needed to slip what. It's back to my bad spatial reasoning, I'm sure, but it was just a lot. So I'm glad I'm done. It did work, and I did do duplicate stitch to create the little design on it that mimics the character's headband. And I did that again with the Cascade 220, the same one that I'm going to use for the golf club cover, which is a worsted weight, so it is definitely thicker than, oh, I didn't even tell you. This is the Sandnesgarn Sisu yarn, which I'd never used before. It's their like sock yarn with a little bit of nylon in it, mostly merino. In the colorway 5937, I believe, this royal blue. So the Cascade 220, it's a worsted weight, so significantly thicker, but I feel like it worked out. I just wanted to use the scrap that I had, and I feel like it worked really well. I feel like the design pops really nicely, and honestly, when I had my chart, I was like, I feel like this works. It's recognizable. I hope the knit isn't too much less recognizable than the chart, but honestly, I feel like this looks even better knitted up than it did in the chart. Like, I'm super happy with how this turned out. I feel like it's definitely recognizable as what it's supposed to be, and that's really all that I wanted. Now, because I knit this to be reversible, I automatically had to buy 2 skeins of yarn to accomplish that, right? I have so much yarn left over. I have a significant amount of the koi left, and also I have a whole other ball. I think I bought 3 balls of the Sisu because that's how much I needed to match the yardage of the koi. It was like 2.5 maybe matched the yardage of the koi, and I think I used like 1 1/4. So like I did need that second ball. I did not need that third ball at all. So the stash has been fed with this one, I'm afraid. Also, doing the duplicate stitch, I was so focused on, you'll know if you've seen my earlier videos, about how because of all the folding that goes into the muscle burra, like which way do I do the pattern so that it folds to be right side up? And in the end, I'm really glad that I went with the duplicate stitch option for this instead of doing it as like stranded color work, because it just made that so much less risky because I was able to like actually fold it up to see. I mean, I hadn't seamed it shut yet when I did this, but I was able to sort of stuff one half inside the other half and fold it up the way it would fold to understand what would be the top and what would be the bottom and duplicate stitch accordingly. I was so focused on that it did not occur to me to pay close attention to the direction of the knitting when I was doing the duplicate stitch. So I start doing it and I'm like, knits are V-shaped. Here's me doing my duplicate stitches on my V's, not noticing that the portion I was doing this on, like relative to how it sits, like the knit fabric itself is actually upside down. So instead of duplicate stitching V's, I should have been duplicate stitching carrots, which meant that like where in my chart I should have had a stitch of gray and then a stitch of black, I ended up with half a stitch of gray at the side. And I was like, how'd that happen? And that's when I realized I was doing it upside down. Let's see if I can recover my hair now. We might just have curtain bangs for the rest of this episode. You can see like on the very edge here, there was intended to be more gray there at the side than there actually is. But oh well, I was able to make the other side match, because the problem with this was that if I just followed the chart as I had originally written it, I would have ended up with 1.5 over here and just a half over there. So I scooted these over by 1 so that it would also have just a half over there. And then I just modified the chart ever so slightly. I think I maybe made this a tiny bit pointier, like come out 1 more stitch or something, just to take up a little bit more space. So it worked out fine. But initially I was like, no, am I gonna have to redo all of this? Because I think that if it had ended up like half on this side, 1.5 on the other, I do think it would have been noticeable and it would have looked weird, but it was fine. We recovered. It was just another like, oh my God, my spatial reasoning strikes again. The other thing I want to say about this one is, while I was working on it, I was concerned that it was going to be too big. It was feeling big on the needles, and when I would like try to put it on my head, I was like, is it too big? I don't know. And so I did a mid-project block. I just blocked like the first half of a hat, and I again was like, I don't know. I hope it's not too big. I'm just going to trust the process. And as we saw, I think in the end, I think it's the perfect fit. I think in part, and this was kind of what I was trusting in working on it, is that because it gets all folded up inside itself and then you get the extra fold for the brim, I was like, it's a lot of layers of fabric that are going to kind of be like pressing in and kind of adding bulk to the inside. I feel like that's probably going to make up for some of what feels kind of roomy right now. And I think that's exactly what happened. So I'm quite happy with this one and how it turned out. I think the variegated side is really fun too. And now I kind of want one for myself. I think this was a very successful project. So to close this out with our final project stats, this was on the needles from October 26th to November 15th. I knit this on 3.5 millimeter needles. So between my Sandnesgarn Sisu and my Fergus Yarn Co. Sock yarn, as well as the pattern cost, this brings us to a total project cost of $75 Canadian. Okay, so that's it for finished objects. I don't have any more whips to show you. I already showed you my book club cardigan, which brings us to acquisitions to close things out. So I recently got an email that made me feel like I have arrived. Because who should email me but Thread and Maple? I have been all over YouTube gushing about my thread and maple binder, telling you that if you're looking to buy a very bougie holiday gift for the knitter in your life for 2 years running, it should be the thread and maple binder. I was so excited when Thread and Maple emailed me and asked if they could send me a couple of things, so let me show them to you. The first thing that I pulled out of the box was their telescopic tool case, which is so cool. It's this little zipper pouch that when you open it up, you can go whoosh and see all of the stuff you have inside and actually pick out of it easily, like a cup that sits on your table. But when you want to take it with you, it goes like this, so you have enough room to do it up, and then off you go. It's just so cute. I am not used to little pouchy things having like mechanical capabilities. Like, it's so cute. It also has little pockets around the inside of this, so like if there were certain things that you wanted to make sure stayed on one side or the other or together, that's also something that you can use. And I just think this is so clever. I'm very curious to know if you had one of these, what you would put in it. Right now I have my set of like rainbow Sharpie fine liners, but I'm very open to trying this out for different things and seeing what feels like the best use of it, because it's so clever that I feel like I want to make sure that I'm using it in like the absolute smartest way, given its capabilities. So let me know if you have any suggestions. On their website, they show crochet hooks in it, which are just not a thing that I have besides the like one that I keep in my knitting project bag to fix errors. And I don't have any spare needles that don't already have a home. So this is very open to other potential use cases, but I think it's so cute, it's so smart. And then the other thing that they sent me was an addition for my binder. They sent me this beautiful page, which has the Rolodex in it, which is similar to one that I already have, except that this one allows me to put more things in more pockets, which we like. And they also sent me the Velcro tab. So this comes off. Their binders are interchangeable in this way, like you get to build your pages based on what needles you want to put on. So they sent me this little tab, which you may recall that when I showed my binder the last time, I had gotten one of the needle storage tabs, put my wood needle set on, except that I didn't. I accidentally got the crochet hook one, which meant that I was able to get my needles in it, but like barely, and I had to kind of wrestle them, like it was all very tight. So this one, they actually fit in very nicely. So that's a nice upgrade. And I'm thinking that I am probably going to look to replace this in the future with, they have a little zipper pouch you can get that Velcros on to fit in the same spot, that I would like to add there instead, because that would allow me to kind of hold some different types of things and separate out a little bit things that I currently have like mixed all in the same pockets. So like one of the things that I'm excited to use the new page for with its Rolodex is I can put my needle cables in here, which means that the one that I already had over here, where I had like needle cords in some of them and stitch markers in others and tried on tubing in others, it was getting quite bulky because I was putting so many different things in there. It'll be really nice to be able to have those things more separate, and so I'm not like rifling through my stitch markers to find a particular kind because they're all mixed together. I'll be able to have them a little bit more organized. And I had been thinking before that there was no way I could fit another page in this binder because it felt like it was full before, but I've found actually in practice in moving things over and adding in this new page that like in moving things over and shuffling things around, that it actually barely took up any new space in the binder at all, because I just had so much crammed into this one page that when it was then dispersed with the other page and stuff, that then laid flatter. So it's all kind of worked out that the binder doesn't really feel chunkier than it was before, but it just has nicer organization in it now. It's just even easier to find what I was looking for than it already was, because this thing is a gem. This is basically all of my knitting worldly possessions, just like nicely contained and organized in one place, and I love it. So Thread and Maple is a Canadian business. All of their goods are manufactured in Ukraine and shipped from Canada, and they're so high quality, they're so nice, they're so beautiful. Of course you pay for that, but if it's in your budget, I highly recommend them. I have truly no complaints. So if you are interested in getting one, I do have an affiliate link in the description box, so it doesn't cost you any extra to buy through that, but it does help me out, which I really appreciate if you choose to do that. And thank you to Thread Maple for sending me a few goodies, because I've been a fangirl for a long time. All right, that's all I've got for you today. So I would love to know, what are your winter knitting plans? And thank you so much for coming to knit with me today. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite, and I'll see you next time. Bye.